Chapter 1 of A Modern Utopia by H.G. Wells. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Modern Utopia by H.G. Wells. Chapter the First. Topographical. Section 1. The utopia of a modern dreamer must needs differ in one fundamental aspect from the nowheres and utopias men planned before Darwin quickened the thought of the world. Those were all perfect and static states, a balance of happiness won for ever against the forces of unrest and disorder that inhere in things. One beheld a healthy and simple generation enjoying the fruits of the earth in an atmosphere of virtue and happiness, to be followed by other virtuous, happy, and entirely similar generations, until the gods grew weary. Change and development were dammed back by invincible dams for ever. But the modern utopia must be not static but kinetic, must shape, not as a permanent state, but as a hopeful stage, leading to a long ascent of stages. Nowadays we do not resist and overcome the great stream of things, but rather float upon it. We build now not citadels, but ships of state. For one ordered arrangement of citizens rejoicing in an equality of happiness, safe and assured to them and their children forever, we have to plan a flexible common compromise, in which a perpetually novel succession of individualities may converge most effectually upon a comprehensive onward development. That is the first, most generalized difference between a utopia based upon modern conceptions and all the utopias that were written in the former time. Our business here is to be utopian, to make vivid and creditable, if we can, first this facet and then that of an imaginary whole and happy world. Our deliberate intention is to be not, indeed, impossible, but most distinctly impracticable by every scale that reaches only between today and tomorrow. We are to turn our backs for a space upon the insistent examination of the thing that is, and face towards the freer air, the ampler spaces of the thing that perhaps might be, to the projection of a state or city worth while, to designing upon the sheet of our imaginations the picture of a life conceivably possible, and yet better worth living than our own. That is our present enterprise. We are going to lay down certain necessary starting propositions, and then we shall proceed to explore the sort of world these propositions give us. It is no doubt an optimistic enterprise, but it is good for a while to be free from the carping note that must needs be audible when we discuss our present imperfections, to release ourselves from practical difficulties and the tangle of ways and means. It is good to stop by the track for a space, put aside the knapsack, wipe the brows, and talk a little of the upper slopes of the mountain we think we are climbing, would but the trees let us see it. There is to be no inquiry here of policy and method. There is to be a holiday from politics and movements and methods. But for all that, we must needs define certain limitations. Were we free to have our untrammelled desire, I suppose we should follow Morris to his nowhere. We should change the nature of man and the nature of things together. We should make the whole race wise, tolerant, noble, perfect. Wave our hands to a splendid anarchy, every man doing as it pleases him, and none pleased to do evil. In a world as good in its essential nature, as ripe and sunny as the world before the fall. But that golden age, that perfect world, comes out into the possibilities of space and time. In space and time, the pervading will to live sustains for evermore a perpetuity of aggressions. Our proposal here is upon a more practical plane at least than that. We are to restrict ourselves first to the limitations of human possibility as we know them in the men and women of this world today, and then to all the inhumanity, all the insubordination of nature. We are to shape our state in a world of uncertain seasons, sudden catastrophes, antagonistic diseases, and inimical beasts and vermin, out of men and women, with like passions, like uncertainties of mood and desire, to our own. And moreover, we are going to accept this world of conflict, to adopt no attitude of renunciation towards it, to face it in no ascetic spirit, but in the mood of the Western peoples, whose purpose is to survive and overcome. So much we adopt in common with those who deal not in utopias, but in the world of here and now. Certain liberties, however, following the best utopian precedents, we may take with existing fact. We assume that the tone of public thought may be entirely different from what it is in the present world. We permit ourselves a free hand with the mental conflict of life, within the possibilities of the human mind as we know it. We permit ourselves also a free hand with all the apparatus of existence that man has, so to speak, made for himself, with houses, roads, clothing, canals, machinery, with laws, boundaries, conventions and traditions, with schools, with literature and religious organization, with creeds and customs, with everything, in fact, that it lies within man's power to alter. That, indeed, is the cardinal assumption of all utopian speculations, old and new. The Republican laws of Plato and More's Utopia, Howell's implicit Altruria, and Bellamy's future Boston, Comte's great Western Republic, Hertzka's Freeland, Cabet's Icaria, and Campanella's City of the Sun, are built, just as we shall build, upon the hypothesis of the complete emancipation of a community of men from tradition, from habits, from legal bonds, and that subtler servitude possessions entail. And much of the essential value of all such speculations lies in this assumption of emancipation, lies in that regard towards human freedom, in the undying interest of the human power of self-escape, the power to resist the causation of the past and to evade, initiate, endeavour and overcome. Section 2. There are very definite artistic limitations also. There must always be a certain effect of hardness and thinness about utopian speculations. Their common fault is to be comprehensively jejune. That which is the blood and warmth and reality of life is largely absent. There are no individualities, but only generalized people. In almost every utopia, except perhaps Morris's News from Nowhere, one sees handsome but characterless buildings, symmetrical and perfect cultivations, and a multitude of people, healthy, happy, beautifully dressed, but without any personal distinction whatever. Too often the prospect resembles the key to one of those large pictures of coronations, royal weddings, parliaments, conferences, and gatherings so popular in Victorian times, in which, instead of a face, each figure bears a neat oval with its index number legibly inscribed. This burdens us with an incurable effect of unreality, and I do not see how it is altogether to be escaped. It is a disadvantage that has to be accepted. Whatever institution has existed or exists, however irrational, however preposterous, has, by virtue of its contact with individualities, an effect of realness and rightness no untried thing may share. It has ripened, it has been christened with blood, it has been stained and mellowed by handling, it has been rounded and dented to the softened contours that we associate with life. It has been salted, maybe, in a brine of tears. But the thing that is merely proposed, the thing that is merely suggested, however rational, however necessary, seems strange and inhuman in its clear, hard, uncompromising lines, its unqualified angles and surfaces. There is no help for it. There it is. The master suffers with the last and least of his successors. For all the humanity he wins to, through his dramatic device of dialogue, I doubt if any one has ever been warmed to desire himself a citizen of the Republic of Plato. I doubt if any one could stand a month of the relentless publicity of virtue planned by Moore. No one wants to live in any community of intercourse really, save for the sake of the individualities he would meet there. The fertilizing conflict of individualities is the ultimate meaning of the personal life, and all our utopias no more than schemes for bettering that interplay. At least, that is how life shapes itself more and more to modern perceptions. Until you bring in individualities, nothing comes into being, and the universe ceases when you shiver the mirror of the least of individual minds. Section 3. No less than a planet will serve the purpose of a modern utopia. Time was when a mountain valley or an island seemed to promise sufficient isolation for a polity to maintain itself intact from outward force. The Republic of Plato stood armed ready for defensive war, and the New Atlantis and the Utopia of Moore in theory, like China and Japan through many centuries of effectual practice, held themselves isolated from intruders. Such late instances as Butler's satirical Erewhon, and Mr. Stead's queendom of inverted sexual conditions in Central Africa, found the Tibetan method of slaughtering the inquiring visitor a simple sufficient rule. But the whole trend of modern thought is against the permanence of any such enclosures. We are acutely aware nowadays that, however subtly contrived a state may be, outside your boundary lines the epidemic, the breeding barbarian, or the economic power will gather its strength to overcome you. The swift march of invention is all for the invader. Now, perhaps you might still guard a rocky coast or a narrow pass. But what of that near tomorrow, when the flying machine soars overhead, free to descend at this point or that? A state powerful enough to keep isolated under modern conditions would be powerful enough to rule the world, would be indeed, if not actively ruling, yet passively acquiescent to all other human organizations, and so responsible for them altogether. World state, therefore, it must be. That leaves no room for a modern utopia in Central Africa, or in South America, or round about the Pole, those last refuges of ideality. The floating isle of La Cité Moraliste no longer avails. We need a planet. Lord Erskine, the author of a Utopia, Our Mater, that might have been inspired by Mr. Hewins, was the first of all utopists to perceive this. He joined his twin planets, pole to pole, by a sort of umbilical cord. But the modern imagination, obsessed by physics, must travel further than that. Out beyond Sirius, far in the deeps of space, beyond the flight of a cannonball flying for 1 billion years, beyond the range of unaided vision, blazes the star that is our Utopia's sun. To those who know where to look, with a good opera glass aiding good eyes, it and 3 fellows that seem in a cluster with it, though they are incredible billions of miles nearer, make just the faintest speck of light. About it go planets, even as our planets, but weaving a different fate, and in its place among them is Utopia, with its sister mate, the moon. It is a planet like our planet, the same continents, the same islands, the same oceans and seas. Another Fuji-Yama is beautiful there, dominating another Yokohama, and another Matterhorn overlooks the icy disorder of another Theodule. It is so like our planet that a terrestrial botanist might find his every species there, even to the meanest pondweed or the remotest alpine blossom. Only when he had gathered the last and turned about to find his inn again, perhaps he would not find his inn. Suppose now that 2 of us were actually to turn about in just that fashion. 2, I think, for to face a strange planet, even though it be a wholly civilized one, without some other familiar backing, dashes the courage overmuch. Suppose that we were indeed so translated, even as we stood. You figure us upon some high pass in the Alps, and though I, being one easily made giddy by stooping, am no botanist myself, if my companion were to have a specimen tin under his arm, so long as it is not painted that abominable popular Swiss apple green, I would make it no occasion for quarrel. We have tramped and botanized and come to a rest, and sitting among rocks we have eaten our lunch and finished our bottle of Yvorne, and fallen into a talk of utopias, and said such things as I have been saying. I could figure it myself upon that little neck of the Lucendro Pass, upon the shoulder of the Piz Lucendro, for there once I lunched and talked very pleasantly, and we were looking down upon the Val Bedretto, and Villa and Fontana and Airolo try to hide from us under the mountain side. 3/4 of a mile they are vertically below. Lantern. With that absurd nearness of effect one gets in the Alps, we see the little train a dozen miles away, running down the Biaschina to Italy, and the Lacmanier Pass beyond Piora left of us, and the San Giacomo right, mere footpaths under our feet. And behold, in the twinkling of an eye, we are in that other world. We should scarcely note the change. Not a cloud would have gone from the sky. It might be the remote town below would take a different air, and my companion the botanist with his educated observation might almost see as much, and the train perhaps would be gone out of the picture, and the embanked straightness of the Ticino in the Ambri-Piotta meadows, that might be altered, but that would be all the visible change. Yet I have an idea that in some obscure manner we should come to feel at once a difference in things. The botanist's glance would, under a subtle attraction, float back to Airolo. "It's queer," he would say quite idly, "but I never noticed that building there to the right before." "Which building?" "That to the right, with a queer sort of thing." "I see it now. Yes. Yes, it's certainly an odd-looking affair. And big, you know. Handsome. I wondered." That would interrupt our utopian speculations. We should both discover that the little towns below had changed, but how, we should not have marked them well enough to know. It would be indefinable, a change in the quality of their grouping, a change in the quality of their remote, small shapes. I should pick a few crumbs from my knee, perhaps. "It's odd," I should say, for the 10th or 11th time, with the motion to rise, and we should get up and stretch ourselves, and, still a little puzzled, turn our faces towards the path that clambers down over the tumbled rocks, and runs round by the still clear lake, and down towards the hospice of St. Gothard, if perchance we could still find that path. Long before we got to that, before even we got to the great high road, we should have hints from the stone cabin in the nape of the pass. It would be gone, or wonderfully changed, from the very goats upon the rocks, from the little hut by the rough bridge of stone, that a mighty difference had come to the world of men. And presently, amazed and amazing, we should happen on a man, no Swiss, dressed in unfamiliar clothing, and speaking an unfamiliar speech. Section 4. Before nightfall we should be drenched in wonders, but still we should have wonder left for the thing my companion, with his scientific training, would no doubt be the first to see. I would glance up with that proprietary eye of a man who knows his constellations down to the little Greek letters. I imagine his exclamation. He would at first doubt his eyes. I should inquire the cause of his consternation, and it would be hard to explain. He would ask me with a certain singularity of manner for Orion, and I should not find him; for the Great Bear, and it would have vanished. Where? I should ask, and where? Seeking among that scattered starriness, and slowly I should acquire the wonder that possessed him. Then for the first time, perhaps, we should realize from this unfamiliar heaven that not the world had changed, but ourselves, that we had come into the uttermost deeps of space. Section 5. We need suppose no linguistic impediments to intercourse. The whole world will surely have a common language that is quite elementarily utopian, and since we are free of the trammels of convincing story-telling, we may suppose that language to be sufficiently our own to understand. Indeed, should we be in Utopia at all if we could not talk to everyone? That accursed bar of language, that hostile inscription in the foreigner's eyes, "Deaf and dumb to you, sir, and so your enemy," is the very first of the defects and complications one has fled the earth to escape. But what sort of language would we have the world speak, if we were told the miracle of Babel was presently to be reversed? If I may take a daring image, a medieval liberty, I would suppose that in this lonely place the spirit of creation spoke to us on this matter. "You are wise men," that spirit might say, and I, being a suspicious, touchy, over-earnest man, for all my predisposition to plumpness, would instantly scent the irony, while my companion, I fancy, might even plume himself. "And to beget your wisdom is chiefly why the world was made. You are so good as to propose an acceleration of that tedious multitudinous evolution upon which I am engaged. I gather a universal tongue would serve you there. While I sit here among these mountains, I have been filing away at them for this last aeon or so, just to attract your hotels, you know. Will you be so kind? A few hints." Then the spirit of creation might transiently smile, a smile that would be like the passing of a cloud. All the mountain wilderness about us would be radiantly lit. You know, those swift moments, when warmth and brightness drift by in lonely and desolate places. Yet, after all, why should two men be smiled into apathy by the infinite? Here we are, with our knobby little heads, our eyes and hands and feet and stout hearts, and if not us or ours, still the endless multitudes about us and in our loins are to come at last to the world state and a greater fellowship in the universal tongue. Let us to the extent of our ability, if not answer that question, at any rate try to think ourselves within sight of the best thing possible. That, after all, is our purpose, to imagine our best and strive for it, and it is a worse folly and a worse sin than presumption to abandon striving because the best of all our bests looks mean amidst the suns. Now you as a botanist would, I suppose, incline to something, as they say, scientific. You wince under that most offensive epithet, and I am able to give you my intelligent sympathy, though pseudo-scientific and quasi-scientific are worse by far for the skin. You would begin to talk of scientific languages, of Esperanto, la langue bleue, New Latin, Volapuk, and Lord Lytton, of the philosophical language of Archbishop Whately, Lady Welby's work upon significs, and the like. You would tell me of the remarkable precisions, the encyclopedic quality of chemical terminology, and at the word terminology I should insinuate a comment on that eminent American biologist, Professor Mark Baldwin, who has carried the language biological to such heights of expressive clearness as to be triumphantly and invincibly unreadable, which foreshadows the line of my defence. You make your ideal clear, a scientific language you demand without ambiguity, as precise as mathematical formulae, and with every term in relations of exact logical consistency with every other. It will be a language with all the inflections of verbs and nouns regular, and all its constructions inevitable, each word clearly distinguishable from every other word in sound as well as spelling. That, at any rate, is the sort of thing one hears demanded, and if only because the demand rests upon implications that reach far beyond the region of language, it is worth considering here. It implies, indeed, almost everything that we are endeavouring to repudiate in this particular work. It implies that the whole intellectual basis of mankind is established, that the rules of logic, the systems of counting and measurement, the general categories and schemes of resemblance and difference, are established for the human mind for ever, blank Comteism, in fact, of the blankest description. But, indeed, the science of logic and the whole framework of philosophical thought men have kept since the days of Plato and Aristotle has no more essential permanence as a final expression of the human mind than the Scottish Longer Catechism. Amidst the welter of modern thought, a philosophy long lost to men rises again into being, like some blind and almost formless embryo that must presently develop sight and form and power, a philosophy in which this assumption is denied. The serious reader may refer at leisure to Sidgwick's use of words in reasoning, particularly, and to Bosanquet's Essentials of Logic, Bradley's Principles of Logic, and Sigwart's Logique. The lighter-minded may read and mark the temper of Professor Case in the British Encyclopaedia, article Logic, volume 30. I have appended to this book a rude sketch of a philosophy upon the new lines, originally read by me to the Oxford Philosophical Society in 1903. All through this utopian excursion, I must warn you, you shall feel the thrust and disturbance of that insurgent movement. In the reiterated use of unique, you will, as it were, get the gleam of its integument. In the insistence upon individuality, and the individual difference as the significance of life, you will feel the texture of its shaping body. Nothing endures, nothing is precise and certain, except the mind of a pedant. Perfection is the mere repudiation of that ineluctable marginal inexactitude which is the mysterious inmost quality of being. Being, indeed! There is no being, but a universal becoming of individualities, and Plato turned his back on truth when he turned towards his museum of specific ideals. Heraclitus, that lost and misinterpreted giant, may perhaps be coming to his own. There is no abiding thing in what we know. We change from weaker to stronger lights, and each more powerful light pierces our hitherto opaque foundations and reveals fresh and different opacities below. We can never foretell which of our seemingly assured fundamentals the next change will not affect. What folly then to dream of mapping out our minds in however general terms, of providing for the endless mysteries of the future a terminology and an idiom. We follow the vein, we mine and accumulate our treasure, but who can tell which way the vein may trend? Language is the nourishment of the thought of man, that serves only as it undergoes metabolism, and becomes thought and lives, and in its very living passes away. You scientific people, with your fancy of a terrible exactitude in language, of indestructible foundations built, as that Wordsworthian doggerel on the title page of Nature says, for I, are marvellously without imagination. The language of Utopia will no doubt be one and indivisible. All mankind will, in the measure of their individual differences in quality, be brought into the same phase, into a common resonance of thought. But the language they will speak will still be a living tongue, an animated system of imperfections, which every individual man will infinitesimally modify. Through the universal freedom of exchange and movement, the developing change in its general spirit will be a world-wide change. That is the quality of its universality. I fancy it will be a coalesced language, a synthesis of many. Such a language as English is a coalesced language. It is a coalescence of Anglo-Saxon and Norman French and scholars' Latin, welded into one speech, more ample and more powerful and beautiful than either. The Utopian tongue might well present a more spacious coalescence, and hold in the frame of such an uninflected or slightly inflected idiom as English already presents, a profuse vocabulary into which have been cast a dozen once separate tongues, superposed and then welded together through bilingual and trilingual promises. In the past, ingenious men have speculated on the inquiry, which language will survive? The question was badly put. I think now that this wedding and survival of several in a common offspring is a far more probable thing. Section 6. This talk of languages, however, is a digression. We were on our way along the faint path that runs round the rim of the lake of Lucendro, and we were just upon the point of coming upon our first Utopian man. He was, I said, no Swiss. Yet he would have been a Swiss on Mother Earth, and here he would have the same face, with some difference, maybe, in the expression, the same physique, though a little better developed perhaps, the same complexion. He would have different habits, different traditions, different knowledge, different ideas, different clothing, and different appliances, but except for all that, he would be the same man. We very distinctly provided at the outset that the modern Utopia must have people inherently the same as those in the world. There is more, perhaps, in that than appears at the first suggestion. That proposition gives one characteristic difference between a modern Utopia and almost all its predecessors. It is to be a world Utopia, we have agreed, no less, and so we must needs face the fact that we are to have differences of race. Even the lower classes of Plato's Republic were not specifically of different race. But this is a Utopia as wide as Christian charity, and white and black, brown, red, and yellow, all tints of skin, all types of body and character will be there. How we are to adjust their differences is a master question, and the matter is not even to be opened in this chapter. It will need a whole chapter even to glance at its issues. But here we underline that stipulation. Every race of this planet Earth is to be found in the strictest parallelism there, in numbers the same, only, as I say, with an entirely different set of traditions, ideals, ideas, and purposes, and so moving under those different skies to an altogether different destiny. There follows a curious development of this to anyone clearly impressed by the uniqueness and the unique significance of individualities. Races are no hard and fast things, no crowd of identically similar persons, but massed sub-races and tribes and families, each after its kind unique, and these again are clusterings of still smaller uniques, and so down to each several person. So that our first convention works out to this: not only is every earthly mountain, river, plant, and beast in that parallel planet beyond Sirius also, but every man, woman, and child alive has a Utopian parallel. From now onward, of course, the fates of these two planets will diverge. Men will die here whom wisdom will save there, and perhaps conversely here we shall save men. Children will be born to them, and not to us and not to them. But this moment of reading is the starting moment, and for the first and last occasion the populations of our planets are abreast. We must in these days make some such supposition. The alternative is a Utopia of dolls in the likeness of angels, imaginary laws to fit incredible people, an unattractive undertaking. For example, we must assume there is a man such as I might have been, better informed, better disciplined, better employed, thinner and more active, and I wonder what he is doing. And you, sir or madam, are in duplicate also, and all the men and women that you know and I. I doubt if we shall meet our doubles, or if it would be pleasant for us to do so. But as we come down from these lonely mountains to the roads and houses and living places of the Utopian world state, we shall certainly find here and there faces that will remind us singularly of those who have lived under our eyes. There are some you never wish to meet again, you say, and some, I gather, you do. And one. It is strange, but this figure of the botanist will not keep in place. It sprang up between us, dear reader, as a passing illustrative invention. I do not know what put him into my head, and for the moment it fell in with my humour for a space to foist the man's personality upon you as yours, and call you scientific, that most abusive word. But here he is indisputably with me in Utopia, and lapsing from our high speculative theme into halting but intimate confidences. He declares he has not come to Utopia to meet again with his sorrows. What sorrows? I protest even warmly that neither he nor his sorrows were in my intention. He is a man, I should think, of 39, a man whose life has been neither tragedy nor a joyous adventure, a man with one of those faces that have gained interest rather than force or nobility from their commerce with life. He is something refined, with some knowledge, perhaps, of the minor pains and all the civil self-controls. He has read more than he has suffered, and suffered rather than done. He regards me with his blue-grey eye, from which all interest in this Utopia has faded. "It is a trouble," he says, "that has come into my life only for a month or so, at least acutely again. I thought it was all over. There was someone—" It is an amazing story to hear upon a mountain crest in Utopia, this Hampstead affair, this story of a Frognal heart. Frognal, he says, is the place where they met, and it summons to my memory the word on a board at the corner of a flint-dressed new road, an estate development road, with a vista of villas up a hill. He had known her before he got his professorship, and neither her people nor his (he speaks that detestable middle-class dialect in which aunts and things with money and the right of intervention are called people) approved of the affair. She was, I think, rather easily swayed, he says. But that's not fair to her, perhaps. She thought too much of others, if they seemed distressed, or if they seemed to think a course right. Have I come to Utopia to hear this sort of thing? Section 7. It is necessary to turn the botanist's thoughts into a worthier channel. It is necessary to override these modest regrets, this intrusive petty love story. Does he realize this is indeed Utopia? Turn your mind, I insist, to this Utopia of mine, and leave these earthly troubles to their proper planet. Do you realize just where the propositions necessary to a modern Utopia are taking us? Everyone on earth will have to be here themselves, but with a difference. Somewhere here in this world is, for example, Mr. Chamberlain, and the King is here, no doubt incognito, and all the Royal Academy, and Sandow, and Mr. Arnold White. But these famous names do not appeal to him. My mind goes from this prominent and typical personage to that, and for a time I forget my companion. I am distracted by the curious side issues this general proposition trails after it. There will be so-and-so, and so-and-so. The name and figure of Mr. Roosevelt jerks into focus, and obliterates an attempt to acclimatize the Emperor of the Germans. What, for instance, will Utopia do with Mr. Roosevelt? There drifts across my inner vision the image of a strenuous struggle with Utopian constables, the voice that has thrilled terrestrial millions in eloquent protest. The writ of arrest drifting loose in the conflict comes to my feet. I impale the scrap of paper and read. But can it be? Attempted disorganization? Incitements to disarrange the balance of population? The trend of my logic for once has led us into a facetious alley. One might indeed keep in this key, and write an agreeable little Utopia, that, like the Holy Families of the medieval artists, or Michelangelo's Last Judgment, should compliment one's friends in various degrees. Or one might embark upon a speculative treatment of the entire Almanach de Gotha, something on the lines of Epistemon's vision of the damned great, when Xerxes was a crier of mustard, Romulus was a salter and a patcher of patterns. That incomparable catalogue, inspired by the muse of parody, we might go on to the pages of Who's Who, and even, with an eye to the obdurate Republic, to Who's Who in America, and make the most delightful and extensive arrangements. Now where shall we put this most excellent man, and this? But, indeed, it is doubtful if we shall meet any of these doubles during our Utopian journey, or know them when we meet them. I doubt if any one will be making the best of both these worlds. The great men in this still unexplored Utopia may be but village Hampdens in our own, and earthly goatherds and obscure illiterates sit here in the seats of the mighty. That again opens agreeable vistas left of us and right. But my botanist obtrudes his personality again. His thoughts have travelled by a different route. I know, he says, that she will be happier here, and that they will value her better than she's been valued upon earth. His interruption serves to turn me back from my momentary contemplation of those popular effigies, inflated by old newspapers and windy report, the earthly great. He sets me thinking of more personal and intimate applications of the human beings one knows, with a certain approximation to real knowledge of the actual common substance of life. He turns me to the thoughts of rivalries and tendernesses, of differences and disappointments. I am suddenly brought painfully against the things that might have been. What if, instead of that Utopia of vacant ovals, we meet relinquished loves here, and opportunities lost, and faces as they might have looked to us? I turn to my botanist almost reprovingly. "You know, she won't be quite the same lady here that you knew in Frognal," I say, and wrest myself from a subject that is no longer agreeable by rising to my feet. "And besides," I say, standing above him, "the chances against our meeting her are 1,000,000 to 1, and we loiter. This is not the business we have come upon, but a mere incidental kink in our larger plan. The fact remains, these people we have come to see are people with like infirmities to our own, and only the conditions are changed. Let us pursue the tenor of our inquiry." With that, I lead the way round the edge of the lake of Lucendro towards our Utopian world. You figure him doing it. Down the valley we shall go, and down the passes, and as the valleys open, and the world will open, Utopia, where men and women are happy and laws are wise, and where all that is tangled and confused in human affairs has been unravelled and made right.
End of Chapter 1.